You're tuned into news across the galaxy where they talk all things LA Galaxy with the Nag Boys. Let's start nagging.
What is up, fellow G's? This is Edgar from News Across the Galaxy, and this is the midweek show. It has been 2 weeks since LA Galaxy fell flat on their faces at Soldier Field, losing to a really dismal Chicago Fire team after a pair of not so convincing victories over two other bad teams in Houston Dynamo and FC Dallas. We discussed that in length in the Sunday show. Well, this weekend, the Galaxy is back in action against another team that's been having a terrible season. I mean, oof, they have lost seven. They had lost 7 games straight before finally defeating another bad team in Seattle Sounders. Of course, I'm talking about the Peter Vermees Wizards. I'm sorry, Sporting Kansas City. And to help us break down what's going on over there in Kansas City in this weekend's matchup, please welcome Jimmy Mack from No Other Pod, covering all things SKC. Welcome to the show, Jimmy, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk a little soccer.
As you can see, I got my wires crossed and I ended up over here in Allen Fieldhouse for some reason. I don't know what I was thinking. I thought it was another game up there in Children's Mercy. And I
It's
mean,
yeah, I honestly, ironically, I would have been a little bit more at home at the Galen Center since I was born and raised in LA, went to USC, so or even the
nice.
sports arena if you want to throw it back.
Oh man, I miss the old sports arena. I remember I went there to one of the very last sporting events there. It was a double header night for me and my buddy. We went down to watch Loyola Marymount play against UCLA because
Okay.
Pauley Pavilion was undergoing some renovations. So they played
Yeah.
against LMU at the old sports arena. And God, I'm an old Clippers fan, so I had not been in there in a long time. And I remember
Been a
going in
minute.
there and it was all rickety and it smelled like old furniture
Yeah.
and it was fun. LMU ended up being UCLA, and we let UCLA know we were doing
I
the
love
whole
it.
"you came a long way just to lose" chant and all this other stuff. And this
That's
is
right.
our house.
I love anytime I hear UCLA lost, it's a good day.
So, and then we literally got out of the sports arena, walked down the street down Figueroa over to Galen Center to watch USC play against Cal State Fullerton, I think it was. And yeah, that was something else. We're like, we watched a Pac-12 doubleheader, man. How
That's
often can you
awesome.
say that, right? From an aging infrastructure, right, an old stadium into like this brand new, well, not brand new, but a modern stadium.
Newer. Yeah.
Yeah, Galen Center is still pretty nice, right?
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, man. So real quick, so you're a Southern California boy,
Yes,
and
sir.
you ended up in Kansas, and I mean out in the Midwest.
Hmm.
I kind of relate because I grew up in South Central LA, and I lived in Wichita, and which is in Kansas for
Hmm.
most of 1999. So how'd you end up out there?
Followed a girl. It's a classic story.
Hey, I can relate. My wife is from North Carolina. She followed me out here, so
Yeah. I finished school at SC and came on out. I've been out here for more than 10 years now, and um, became a huge Sporting KC fan. Went to my first game in 2014. It was a U.S. Open Cup game against the Portland Timbers. Sporting KC lost 3-1, but the atmosphere hooked me, and I've been a fan ever since. And I've been covering the team in some capacity for gosh, going on 7 years now, starting in 2017 for a website called Total MLS back in the day, and been bouncing around to a couple places because soccer media, it's a tough landscape out there. So there's a website and then it goes away. But Total MLS, SBI Soccer, and then most recently Kansas City Soccer Journal used to be part of SB Nation, and now it's independent. And now, yeah, No Other Pod, which is part of the KC Sports Network.
nice. So are you on the Kansas side or the Missouri side?
I live on the Missouri side currently.
Oh,
So, but
okay.
there used to be that sort of border war mentality. It's faded a little bit, but it still pops up every now and then.
Yeah, it's one thing. I mean, like I said, I lived in Kansas for a while, so I was immersed fully into the whole Big 12 culture out there.
Yeah.
Especially whenever KU played against Mizzou, it was a big deal
Yeah.
because of the border war, and I feel like they kind of tarnished that. It lost some of its luster with
Yeah,
college football, just moving so many pieces around.
for sure.
But it'd be really interesting, right? To see that in other sports, but we kind of saw a resurgence of that with the emergence of St. Louis City SC, right?
Hmm.
I mean, we have a good friend out there who covers them, and he was telling us about how passionate the fans are whenever they get to play against SKC,
Yeah.
and that they're even throwing around the idea of a funny nickname for the Derby. I mean, it's not real Derby, but they want to call it the Barbecue.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like,
I've heard that. That's one idea that's been thrown around. There's nothing official yet, but it's that's one of the ideas I've heard. I will say it's great to have St. Louis City in the league. I mean, Sporting Kansas City prior to St. Louis, the closest club was like an 8-hour drive away. It was basically Chicago and then Minneapolis and Nashville and to some extent Colorado are we're right there too. But now we can just pop on I-70 and drive a few hours to St. Louis, and the fan bases have their fun going back and forth at each other. It's certainly become a pretty good rivalry real fast. But I've had nothing but good experiences the few times I've been to City Park in St. Louis, so it's a good place.
I'm glad to hear that. So, tell us what's going on with SKC because, like I said, they had lost 7 games in a row. My goodness.
Yeah.
And before they finally beat Seattle, Seattle is having a really weird season.
Mhm.
They haven't been the same since the winning the Champions League, right? Champions Cup.
CONCACAF Champions League, now Champions Cup, whatever you want to call
Yeah, they
it.
keep changing it every day, right?
All different.
But yeah, SKC is having so many issues this season. What's going on? We spoke
Hmm.
to our friend Kevin earlier in the season, and he was pointing to just the fact that Burmese has been there for so long.
Hmm.
There need to be some changes with the tactics
Hmm.
or just the mentality of the club. Is this still more the same, or do you think it's something that's a lot deeper than that?
Yeah, that's it's a tough question because there's no one thing that is the problem with this club. Unfortunately, Kevin's right. I love Kevin. Kevin's great. Talked to him before. He Peter Vermees. The entire club built in the image of Peter Vermees, and I don't just mean in terms of like soccer on the field. I mean in terms of the academy system, in terms of SKC2, part of MLS Next Pro. I mean in terms of the training facilities, the nutrition program. There is not a thing that happens in Sporting Kansas City that does not have Peter Vermees' fingerprints on it. And at this point, he's been around for going on 15 years as head coach. He played for Kansas City back when they were the Wizards back in the day. He's still the only coach to ever win an MLS Cup as a player and also a coach with the same team in MLS. Um, the issue is, as you see in my view, the underlying issue is as you've seen MLS continue to grow and expand, and you've seen more teams come in with ownership groups that are willing to spend money, that are willing to go out there and sign. Not just, I mean, we're kind of reverting back to it a little bit with the aging European players, but especially for a period of time, it was younger South American players who were coming in as very talented designated players and then getting sold over to Europe as they started to shift that way. Um, you saw that very rarely did you have the singular person atop a club where they were both the manager and the technical director or sporting director who had total autonomy over everything. Peter's really, as far as I know, basically the only guy who still has that setup in the league. There's no more Bruce Arenas. There's no more
Yeah.
people who are just solely unchecked power atop a club. It's now there's a manager who gets to focus on managing. There's a technical director who can focus on scouting and roster development and contracts, etc. Peter's been in this mix bag where he's got one foot on each side. And I think if you look at ultimately what's gone wrong with Sporting this year, is the players that Peter Vermees built, or this roster that Peter Vermees built this year with these players, even though it's by and large the same roster that was last year, it's a year older. There's not a whole lot of depth, especially in the midfield, and they're just not a very athletic team. And Peter's known for his fast pace, 4-3-3. Sporting fit is a phrase that they use, and this team just can't honestly keep up right now. And unless this team is perfect, essentially on any given game, there's just too many holes to try to plug. It's like you're on a sinking ship trying to plug all the leaks and you can't do it.
Yeah, and it's not like you don't have good players because you obviously you still have Johnny Russell, who we've wanted to have an LA Galaxy for a while. We even tried spreading the rumor last year that he was going to come over to LA Galaxy because we wanted him that bad. Alan Pulido, obviously, and Eric Thami. So it's just the fact, like, and then of course Saloi, right, who's one of more better players on there. So it's just the fact that people have gotten used to the Vermees's tactics or style, and it just there needs to be some turnover. You think? Is it?
It's
But by the way, just sorry to cut you off, but it kind of reminds me of, and you mentioned the USC, right?
mhm.
Is it the kind of control that a Pete Carroll had during USC's heydays back in the mid 2000s?
Yeah, to an extent. I think the key difference is, obviously being back in college football in that time, pre NIL, pre anything, it's, kids sign a contract and then they're there for 4 years on scholarship. And that's basically it. You don't have a salary cap you got to deal with. Peter, if you look at some of the players that you mentioned, Alan Pulido, he just signed a new contract prior to this year, making close to $4 million a year. You look at the stats he's putting up, he's not putting up $4 million a year stats. Johnny Russell, he's getting a little older in age, and he's had some durability issues in terms of injuries. Daniel Shaley's just simply been out of form for the better part of a year or two. Eric Tommy's the bright spot. You hit the nail on the head. If Eric Tommy is on the field, this team has a much better chance of winning than if Eric Tommy is not on the field. He is the only true attacking midfielder on the roster, and he's the only one that provides a direct attacking threat with a spark of creativity. It's just, this team is, like I said, it's simply not an athletic team. Alan Pulido is not an overly athletic striker. He's technically gifted, but if you've been watching him this year, man, he looks slow and tired, and he's just not moving the way he has in years past. And he's had a number of surgeries and whatnot. But quite honestly, this team, they also have the oldest starting lineup by average age in the entire league. So it needs an influx of youth. It needs a technical director who can take a more objective look. This is not a one transfer window fix. This is a multi-transfer window project.
Yeah, we've been hearing the same from some of our other podcast friends at Seattle, San Jose. So I guess it's just something that's going on in MLS right now. There needs to be some evolution, especially as the league is constantly changing. The big push that everybody got from having Leo Messi join the league, and now a lot of clubs are trying to catch up or just make sure that they don't get caught in the undertow.
Yeah. Well, and one of the challenges, just real quick, that Kansas City will always face is Kansas City's not a destination that many international players are going to jump at the chance to come
but Cristiano Ronaldo was going to head over there.
Well, I have some thoughts on how much that actually was happening or not. But, I love Kansas City. And quite frankly, the success of the Chiefs and somebody like Patrick Mahomes has made it more of a place that people know about. But Kansas City's never going to be able to compete with LA or Miami or New York City or Chicago. There's a reason why, these big name players are landing in some of the usual spots. And it's a lot harder for Kansas City or even, to a lesser extent, San Jose, even though it's near San Francisco, it's still not LA. It's not Miami. It's not New York City. So it makes it tough.
Yeah. I live in Kansas, and I love Kansas. I loved going up to Kansas City and visiting, exploring. But unless it's one of those places where unless you go and visit and see it for yourself, you're not going to be like, oh, I want to go there.
100%. Yep. Right. I never thought I was going to live here. I didn't know anything about it until I came here, and I was like, oh, that's cool. But if you're Antoine Griezmann, because Taylor Twellman threw his name out there, you can be living over in Europe. You're winning World Cups for the France national team, and now you're going to come live in Overland Park, Kansas. I don't know. That's tough.
Yeah, spend a weekend hanging out at the Flamingo down on the river, right?
There you go. Yeah.
So, is it fair to say that Peter Vermees is on the hot seat? Because I've been hearing rumors about that. Because you cannot lose 7 games and just be like, oh, it's no big deal, right?
So is it fair to say he's on the hot seat? If you asked a lot of fans, then they would have said yes. Is Peter Vermees on the hot seat? No, he's not. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Ownership signed him to a contract extension prior to the 2023 season, a 5-year extension beyond his current deal. So Peter Vermees is currently under contract through the 2028 season.
Wow.
So that is the remainder of this year and then 4 additional seasons beyond that. So if you're going to buy him out, it's going to cost a lot of money to buy him out. The other reason I know he's not on the hot seat is ownership came out and said this week he is not on the hot seat. They finally spoke. They spoke to a Kansas City Star columnist, Sam McDowell, and Mike Illig, who is the primary owner, at least publicly, flat out said Sporting Kansas City is not firing Peter Vermees, and that while this is a time for Sporting to be more active in the next 2 to 3 transfer windows, and they have an opportunity with 3/4 of the roster either out of contract or up for an option this offseason, he said explicitly, I believe Peter Vermees is the correct person to be in charge of this roster overhaul.
Wow, that's I mean, how do you feel about that? And I mean, from a supporter's point of view, do you feel like a sense of dread of that maybe the club has gone complacent?
I think that is a very common perspective amongst sporting fans currently, especially when you look at the way teams have come into the league and hit the ground running, whether it be St. Louis just down the highway or Austin, Charlotte, Atlanta going back to 2017 when they joined the league, 20 somewhere around there. LAFC, as much as Galaxy fans may not want to hear it, they come in, they hit the ground running, and they spend money, and they're successful. And it's not just the soccer side of things for sporting fans that have felt like they've gotten stale. Children's Mercy Park used to be considered a crown jewel of soccer-specific stadiums in the U.S. Now it's just kind of another stadium. And the business side of things, there used to be Boulevard Brewing, a local brewery, had a partnership with Sporting, and it was available all throughout the stadium. Now it's Anheuser-Busch. There used to be local restaurants. Now it's just Aramark or one of those national chains. So everything just feels a little bit more antiseptic.
I was gonna say sterile, yeah.
Yeah, sterile, stale, antiseptic, something. And when you're comparing it to what St. Louis is doing just down the road, and they're crushing it in terms of game day atmosphere, that's part of the issue. And with Peter, I think, do I believe Peter is a good coach? Yes. Do I believe Peter is also incredibly rigid to a fault at times? Yes. And I think when you hear him saying the same things, press conference after press conference, and you're in the midst of a 10-game winless streak and you've lost 7 in a row, hearing quotes like, well, yeah, we gave up 3 goals, but outside of that, I saw a lot of good stuff, gets a little bit frustrating for fans.
Yeah, broken record. Now, does beating, I mean, let's admit, Seattle is not that good, right?
Sure.
We have a friend of the show named Cheyenne. He covers Seattle Sounders, and he just will talk your ear up about how Seattle has just grown old, and they need to completely revamp the roster, and they're not in a situation to do that right now. Does beating a Seattle team in that sorry of a state affect Vermees' status at all? I mean, are people going to be like, oh, okay, we're turning things around, or is it just like, oh, it's just a little hiccup?
From a fan perspective, it doesn't change a whole lot. Now, the irony of this is last year in 2023, Sporting KC started the season off a 10-game winless streak, 0 wins, 7 draws, 3 losses. And what turned it around? It was a 2-1 victory over the Seattle Sounders. This year, 10-game winless streak, 0 wins, 8 losses, 2 draws. And it was a 2-1 win over the Seattle Sounders that broke it. So last year they turned it around, and they were, a couple inches away from the Western Conference Finals. Can they do it again this year? I don't know. The key difference between this year and last year is last year there was a bunch of key injuries that were waiting to come back. Alan Pulido was just working his way back from injury. Gadi Kinda, a designated player who's no longer with the team, just coming back. Johnny Russell just coming back. Everyone's basically been healthy this year. There's no reinforcements coming off the bench. So it's either going to be through the transfer window, but even with the way that MLS schedule congestion is, say you bring someone in for the transfer window, there's only 9 MLS games that are going to be left after the transfer window opens for Sporting. So could it turn things around? Sure, you got to start somewhere. It helped that we got a red card, and it helped that Stefan Frei forgot how to play goalkeeper for a few minutes. But I don't think long-term it really changes much. Sporting still need to find a technical director. They still need to basically have a total roster overhaul.
So what's the you kind of scratch the surface on this. What's the outlook for the second half of the season for this club?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think they're gonna be able to put together a push for the playoffs, or do you think they're just gonna simmer and remain as they are towards the end?
Um, it's going to be very tough because they've dug themselves to a hole where last year, if you look at points, I think they finished with 44 points and they snuck on into the playoffs. This year, if you're using roughly the same 44-point line to get into the playoffs, okay, well, for the remainder of the year, they need to get 30 points because they have 14 right now through 17 games. So 30 points across 17 games. Is it doable? Yes. Is it going to be easy? Absolutely not. I mean, they've basically created a situation for themselves where they have zero margin for error. You're going to have to win at home. You're going to have to draw on the road, and that's going to be the formula. And if you can't close out games at home like they have been unable to do quite a bit this year, then every single point you lose is closing, that little bit of hope that you might make it into the playoffs. So it's possible the only chance for hardware this year is the US Open Cup because they are in the quarterfinals, but you know, everybody knows the Open Cup's not quite what MLS Cup is.
Yeah. Although let's save the Open Cup. I love the Open
I
Cup,
love the
right?
Open Cup.
Yeah.
If they could win it this year, I'd throw a party.
Yeah. There you go, right? Hey, better to have some hardware than nothing, right?
Yep, for sure.
So the second half of the season began with that victory over Seattle, and now you guys head out to LA. Um, what's the outlook for this match? Because I just got word that Joseph Paintsil, who had been dealing with a hamstring injury, is now going to be back in action. And during his absence, LA Galaxy was able to actually put together a couple of victories
Mm-hmm.
before finally losing to Chicago. And I feel like they really, really need him, especially it showed that game against Chicago. They need his spark. It kind of seems like LA Galaxy just, I think they overestimated, I'm sorry, they underestimated Chicago Fire. And having him back will be a huge boost. So, from the Kansas City point of view, how do you guys see this game coming in?
Yeah, this is going to be a tough game. I mean, playing the Galaxy is always a tall task. Sporting's had success against the Galaxy before. I mean, even going back to the Zlatan days and such, Sporting have been able to go there and earn draws at least. My most recent memory of playing in Dignity Health Sports Park as I was there when Chicharito tried to Panenka our backup goalkeeper from the penalty spot right at the end of the game, and he just stood pat and caught it right there. So I mean, Sporting have found some success. My biggest fear is Ricky Puig in the midfield is an absolute monster, and Sporting KC's midfield. We don't have a Roger Espinoza anymore who can sort of muck things up in the midfield and be physical and cause some confusion. Eric Tommy's got skill, but my biggest fear is who will be able to control the midfield. And I think there's a huge advantage to the LA Galaxy. And then with having forwards like Paintsil and Joveljic, this is a shaky back line that Sporting has that, excuse me, while relatively athletic compared to back lines of years past for Sporting KC, they make silly mental errors, just terrible mental errors at the worst times. And Sporting gives up a lot of set piece goals. So if Ricky Puig can control the midfield, and if the Galaxy can send numbers into the box, maybe win some free kicks in dangerous spots, they have an offense that can put some goals away. And if you look at the underlying numbers for Sporting Kansas City, they are not a great defense. And they're not a great offense either. They're actually scoring more goals than they should in terms of expected goals, but it's not been. There's not a lot of bright spots even in the advanced analytics for Sporting KC.
Is Tim Melia still the man, or do you think he's getting up there in his age or
He's
durability?
he's still the guy right now. John Pulskamp is the backup keeper, and he's decent. He's pretty young. The biggest downturn I've seen in Melia's game recently is he's not as confident when he comes out to punch a ball away. He can't quite muster what he used to for some reason behind it. So he'll come out and he'll go for a punch, or he'll try to clear it, and there have been numerous times this year where it just doesn't really clear the box all that well, and then it creates havoc in a loose ball situation. So he's still great against penalties. So he's got a career near 50% penalty save rate, which is insane. But age catches up to everybody, even goalkeepers.
Yeah. So going into this match, LA Galaxy and Kansas City, whether it is as the Wizards, or Sporting KC, have played each other 80 times. And in those 80 games, it's been pretty even. 32 wins for LA Galaxy, 29 wins for SKC with 19 draws. Throw into that the fact that for some reason or other, Greg Vanney has always had a very difficult time with Peter Vermees. In fact, the very first time he beat Peter Vermees was a 3-2 Galaxy victory earlier this season, which we saw SKC go up to nothing, and Galaxy just roared back in this crazy second half, which last year Galaxy would have lost that game. But this season, something about this team, it's weird. We were just talking about how for some reason or other, we haven't seen them pull together a full 90 minutes with that type of energy. But if they catch you on a bad day, they will make your second half really, really rough. And they did for Kansas City. So that's one factor to look into. Another is the referee statistics. And this is something that I always bring up because I started noticing patterns and whoever is calling the game. For our game, Jimmy, I told you it's going to be Chris Pencil as referee. I looked up the statistics, and Pencil has been around since 2011. He has refereed 235 MLS matches, including 23 with the LA Galaxy, leading to 8 wins, 7 draws, and 8 losses. At home, Galaxy has 5 wins, 2 draw, and 3 losses with him. As far as Kansas City is concerned, he's done 22 SKC matches for 10 wins, 6 draws, and 6 losses. But SKC on the road has 2 wins, 2 draws, and 3 losses with him. Also, I noticed that overall, Chris Pencil, when he is in charge of the game, the home team wins more than 50% of the time. And with the home team only losing like 25% of the time. So that's something to keep in mind. And he calls a lot of yellow cards. That's 26 yellow cards in his last 4 matches. So, wow.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. Yeah, and including 10 in the last 2. So that's a lot. No reds, which is kind of funny. Just a lot of yellows. He's like, stop it. Here's a yellow. Stop it.
Yeah.
Stop hitting each other. So taking all that into account, the history between these two teams, Vanney versus Vermees, the referee, and the current status of our clubs, what is your prediction for this weekend?
I mean, despite Sporting KC pulling out a victory against the Seattle Sounders, there hasn't been much that Sporting has shown me over the last 3-4 months of the season to give me logical reasons to say Sporting Kansas City will get a win or potentially even a result. I think best case scenario realistically for Sporting Kansas City is you steal a point on the road. And if you can get a point on the road from the Galaxy, and like I said, you can come back and start turning things around at home and winning at home, then that's the formula for success. Realistically, if I were a betting man, which I say never bet on MLS because MLS is the most insane league.
Yes, it is.
I would say that Galaxy walking out with 3 points is the far more likely scenario, especially since the Galaxy have not lost at Dignity Health Sports Park this year. So if Sporting can steal a point on the road, great. They got so much more athleticism, and Ricky Puig in the midfield is just somebody that really does scare me.
So what's your score prediction for this game?
Oh goodness.
Sorry.
I could see it, 2-0 Galaxy, 3-1 Galaxy, probably. Sporting don't score a lot of goals, or certainly don't create a lot of expected goals. They've been scoring some goals from distance that have real low XG values. They don't get a lot of runners in the box. So if they get a draw, I could see it being, a 1-1 draw where the defense and Emilia make a couple of big saves and they maybe steal a goal. Because I said that, it's probably going to be like an 8-goal thriller now. But if they do get a draw, I could envision it being a like a 1-1 slugfest.
Well, wouldn't that just be great for the LA Galaxy fan psyche, right? To follow up that loss to Chicago with like a really difficult game against Sporting Kansas City. For some reason, LA Galaxy always plays to the level of their opponents. It doesn't matter
Mm,
whether they're in good or bad shape. Like if they're playing a good team, they'll wake up and come out and play hard, and then
yeah.
they'll play somebody like Chicago or San Jose, and they struggle. So this could go anywhere from, like you said, from like a really like just feisty draw
Hmm.
that leaves everyone perplexed, to just a solid 3-1 victory for Galaxy, which is what I'm predicting.
Yeah.
But like you said, MLS is so weird, especially at those midweek games. Obviously, it's not a midweek game, but MLS is it's a strange creature, right? You never
Yeah.
know what to expect.
Any
But
week, any team can beat another team. I mean, over the course of the season, sure, the cream of the crop rises to the top, but on any given night, you know, who knows what happens.
yeah, so well, LA Galaxy fans, I'm gonna be out there as usual this weekend. Do you guys remember that Comets SC is gonna be hosting a Juneteenth tailgate party? That's gonna be in the large section of the little. I don't know if you guys have ever been there, but it's the paddock in the north end of the stadium. Be there. The tailgate starts at 3:30 p.m. There's going to be food. There's going to be music, drinks. It's going to be a really good time. We really like Comets FC. They're doing a great job to try to get a lot of people into the stands, and they have that amazing program with the historically black players, the LA Galaxy. They're the little cards. We have these. You should see them, Jimmy. They're really cool. These collectible cards. In fact, I have one right here. I have a Giazzi Sardis one.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah, he got different artists to draw the different players, and he made cards out of them. And you could buy either individually or an entire pack. I have like the
That's
whole pack of
amazing.
the first two series, so I'm really looking forward to seeing more of these. So yeah, that's something we have to look forward to this weekend. Hopefully, we get a good, entertaining match. Doesn't matter if SKC shuts down the LA Galaxy, or Galaxy fans get to savor another victory. More than anything, we just hope for an entertaining match. It's something that we always say no matter what. But hey, Jimmy, thank you so much for joining us, especially on such short notice.
Oh yeah, no worries.
And we look forward to having you on the show again. And hopefully, next time we get your other buddies on here too, so we can get some nice chatter going on, right?
Yeah, Dan, he does theater and comedy shows. So he's in a show right now as we're recording this. So that's why he's on stage being a star somewhere.
Hey, but you're being a star with us. So there you
There you
go.
go. That's right.
All right. Well, tell everybody where they can find you, and your podcast on socials.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Check us out. No Other Pod on Twitter, X, whatever Elon wants to call it now, and all other social media. Our podcast, you can find it KCSN Soccer, wherever you find podcasts. And check me out, JCMac03 on socials. I'm either yelling about soccer or being sad about USC football, one of the two. So
Oh man, let's not go down that wormhole.
yeah.
um, as always, you guys can find me on Twitter, X, whatever. Or actually, no, never Twitter. I'm sorry, never X. Always
Yes, that's
Twitter,
right.
baby.
I still call it Twitter.
Yeah, still call it Twitter. And you guys can find me as Edgar Nags, or simply NA_GS. Like I said, I'm the co-host for Nag News. Until next time, thank you guys so much, and keep on nagging. And remember, Wu Tang for life, baby. Let's go.